Hello. Today we're going to recap and break down the movie Pandorum. The same producers who brought you Resident Evil, well, this time they brought you Pandorum. Well, not this time, probably during the same period. So, in 2153, a space probe discovered the planet Tannis suitable for life in deep space. At that time, the world's population was 24 billion people. That's approximately thrice of today's Earth's population, as per 2011 census, 2021 census. Mankind was short on food and the necessities of life, at the civic amenities and resources. The same kind of concept. Another indefinite amount of time passes. A man on board suddenly awakens from a hypersleep pod. He takes off his oxygen mask, convulses, and screams loudly, but no one comes to help him. Thanks to the inscription on the capsule, we learn that this man is Corporal Bauer. He manages to cut the wires and get out of the capsule. Bauer gradually comes to his senses, pulls the mucus of his body, and pulls out the catheters. But the man can hardly remember anything. There are obvious electrical problems aboard, so Bauer finds a flashlight and looks around. This is how he finds Lieutenant Peyton's capsule. This name sounds familiar to Bauer. The corporal put on his uniform and finds a picture of his wife in his locker. After that, the man tries to get on the captain's bridge, but the door does not open. Bauer can't understand anything and, with a scream, hits Lieutenant Peyton's capsule with a piece of rubber. But he doesn't wake up. After that, there is a powerful surge of electricity and the lieutenant's capsule opens by itself. Peyton tries to recover from his stasis and also doesn't remember anything. The men assume that their watch is about to begin, but it's strange why no one has woken them up. Bauer thinks they are alone on the ship and they were awakened by the navigation computer. The men do not remember where they are flying or their mission or what they are here for. It's impossible to get to the bridge without electricity. Peyton turns on the backup power in their quarters and tries to read it for someone. Bauer finds a tattoo on his arm suggesting that they are Group 5. The men do not understand what happened to the fourth group, which must now prepare for anabiosis. Biosis. It's also a mystery where the third member of the team, Lieutenant Cooper, went. His capsule is empty. Suddenly, the men hear some sounds in the ventilation system. Peyton suggests that Bauer climb up the vent and look around in the other compartment. The corporal takes a communications transmitter from him to talk to his commander and sets off. This communication device works on the backup power. Nothing can be seen in the tube, but Peyton promises to monitor the subordinate's movements and guide him. Power surges are getting worse. This means the ship's nuclear reactor is now off and trying to come back on, but it needs to reboot. There is still no way out of the ventilation shaft. Becomes uncomfortable. He can't breathe. He's starting to get nervous. Peyton makes him laugh and calms him down. Fantastic. The lieutenant then recalls that the shift change was supposed to take place every 2 years. If they are members of the fifth group, that means that only 8 years have passed since the start of the flight. At this time, Bauer falls down the shaft and ends up at the ventilation hatch on the lower level. The man lights the lantern and sees a dead Lieutenant Cooper next to him, to his horror, who, judging by his condition, was stuck here several years ago. Bauer makes a dash, kicks the hatch, and falls into the much lower compartment. The connection with Peyton is interrupted. Bauer explores the room in which he is trapped and finds many human pods. Clanking sounds can be heard in the distance. Bauer sees a girl with his flashlight and starts running after her, but she quickly escapes. Finally, the corporal appears to think the girl has stopped, but as she gets closer, he sees that the frozen figure is not a girl, but a man who has long ago harmed himself. While Bauer examines the find, the lurking girl knocks him down and confronts him. She looks wild and makes the corporal take off his shoes, but then a growl is heard in the hallway and the girl runs away in terror. Bauer shines his flashlight around and notices the outlines of strange humanoid like creatures. Then he puts out the flashlight prudently, hides in the back corridor as well. Some creature rushes down the corridor at a wild ass speed. It is a creepy, roaring monster with spiked fangs all over its body. He smells Bauer and is looking for him. The man hides in a corner holding his breath, but at that moment the connection with Peyton resumes and he loudly calls Bauer to the phone. This gives the man's position away and the monster attacks him, trying to wound him with a spear. But Bauer presses himself into the wall and remains unharmed. Soon the monster leaves, taking the dead Lieutenant Cooper with him. Then the frightened Bauer gets in touch with the commander, terrified, tells him what happened and asks him to call the rescue team in any way he can. But Peyton says nothing will succeed because he remembered something. Elysium is not designed to go backwards. They are the cargo, 60,000 people traveling towards Tanis. After this words, Bauer too sinks into memories. When the probe first landed on Tanis, he was a child and watched the live broadcast with his father and mother. Water, plants, and everything necessary for human life were found on this planet. The decision was then made to send the first settlers to Tanis. With that in mind, Bauer realizes that the journey on the Elysium is a one way ticket. The man thinks of his wife again, but can't remember if she is flying to Tanis or not. Bauer is very nervous and wants to go in search of his wife to save her from the monsters. Peter asks the corporal to calm down and concentrate on saving the ship. Bauer listens to him and finds a non lethal weapon. He then asks Peyton to find him a route to the reactor to reset it manually. Bauer sets off and suddenly feels a strange jitters. He fears that this is how the symptoms of the insanity that astronauts call Pandorum manifest themselves. It all started when an officer on a 2 year watch on a spaceship called Eden had a nervous breakdown. He went crazy, insane, and decided the flight was cursed and ejected 5,000 passengers into outer space. Of course, no one survived. Remembering this, Bauer tries to shake off thoughts of the Pandorum. The man continues to move down the corridor and discovers a motionless man. Suddenly, he regains consciousness and Bauer saves the unfortunate man. He turns out to be a member of the sixth group for some reason long awake. Realizing that Bauer is unaware of what is happening on the ship, the man begins to slather on some brown liquid on himself. It is necessary to neutralize the smell and escape from the monsters. Suddenly, the men hear the monsters growling, run away, and hide. But the monsters do find the officer of the sixth group and drag him after them. The creatures are intent on killing the man. Bauer tries to save him, but nothing works. Then he runs to save himself. The man runs through the corridors but soon stumbles and falls from a great height. Bauer is saved only by a rope, which he miraculously clings to. The communication transmitter falls off the ledge and communication with Peyton is completely lost. The monsters pursue Bauer, but at the last moment, a nimble guy with a spear comes to his aid. Having escaped the chase, the men hide behind the gate at one of the compartments. The savior's name is Meng. He speaks a language unknown to Bauer, but he looks friendly. From the tattoo on his arm, the corporal realizes that this new comrade is from the agriculture group. After that, Bao goes into the good food supplies. This is where the nimble girl he met earlier jumps on him, but now Meng comes to the guy's rescue. While fighting ensues between him and the girl, Bao fires his gun into the air. The two wildlings are frightened and hear Bao's words. He says that they have to stick together and asks them to escort him to the reactor. Meng shows signs that he knows the way. The roar of the monsters is heard again, and the three of them start moving. The girl's name is Nadia, such a beautiful name, and she thinks that the way to the reactor is very dangerous because no one has ever returned from there. But Bao believes it is necessary to save the ship and land it by all means. Nadia gains his trust and tells him that she woke up 6 months ago. She put her hand to the lock on one of the doors and wait for something. The monsters start getting close to them and they desperately need to escape. But Nadia tells them to wait. Soon the door opens and having fought off the monsters, the company runs into a bright room. The friends end up in the environmental compartment. Nadia has lived here all along. She accompanies the embryos of the animals and plants that will settle on Tanis. On Earth, the girl worked as a geneticist. She and her colleagues spent 7 years collecting samples of Earth's biosphere to recreate life on the new planet. Listening to Nadia, Bao recalls that it takes about 123 years to fly from Earth to Tanis. The girl gives the corporal a cricket to eat. Wow. Mech cricket meal you could get on spaceship, and suggests that Elysium has been on the road for well over on the space road well over 8 years. Meanwhile, Peyton tries to break down the door and get to the captain's bridge. Suddenly, he hears a strange sound in the ventilation pipe and closes the hatch just in case. Later, the sound is repeated, but instead of a monster, a tormented man in a strange black slime appears out of the hole. He begs for help, and Peyton helps him out. The guy's speech is really incoherent and disrupted. He trembles and says in a weak voice that he is Corporal Gallo of the fourth group. Gallo had been on the captain's bridge and now found himself in the state. At this time, Bauer and his crew arrive at the cruise Anabios' Bay. Almost all of the capsules are empty. According to Nadia, people were taken by monsters. Meng is weary, staying still among the pods. Actually, we're curious about something, and Bauer wants to go back to him, but he falls down onto the floor on the way. Nadia follows him. The friends find themselves up to their shoulders in a muddy liquid and find a lot of filth there. Above them, a monster walks among the pods, but it soon goes silent. Then the friends make their way to the surface. Power cautiously shines his flashlight in the darkness, but the monster immediately attacks them. The corporal gets tangled up in the wires and begins to feel the symptoms of Pandorum. But watching the monster overpower Nadia, Bao somehow comes back to his senses and rushes to the girl's aid. A fierce fight breaks out. As Bao and Nadia fall on the floor, Meng appears. The friends gather their last forces and attack the monster from three sides, but then a second monster appears.
It bangs its spears against a wall and calls it to a crowd of its brethren. The three of them run away quickly. Peyton, meanwhile, brings Gallo to his senses and asks what happened at the bridge. He says that the other two members of his team are possessed by the Pandorum. Tom had to protect himself, but Peyton doesn't believe him. Nadia continues to lead her friends to the reactor. Suddenly, they notice an inconspicuous cabin with a closing hatch and decide they should rest here for a while and learn about the events. But another man named Leland shows up at the cabin. Now, he turns on a light and informs them that he has lived there for a long time, and he proceeds to cook a meal for his tired friends. We all know how this ends, right?
Meanwhile, Bauer discusses with Nadia where the monsters on the ship came from. The girl thinks they used to be people sleeping in the pods in a cryosleep, but these people woke up from an accident a long time ago and began to mutate because of the accelerator, a synthetic food enzyme that was fed into the capsules. Now, Lillian overhears this conversation and decides to tell his friends what he knows. Gallo finally comes to his senses and begins to haunt Peyton like a ghost. The lieutenant keeps a tranquilizer near him to calm Gallo if anything happens. The young corporal paces the room imposingly, listing the symptoms of Pandorum and advising Peyton to look for them in himself. With these words, Gallo is about to tell Peyton the terrible truth. His story echoes of Leland, who at the time begins to tell his friends his side of the story. When the Elysium journey began, all the passengers were asleep. This went on for several years. At this time, the captain's bridge had a change of crew every 2 years. Everything went smoothly at first, and then the fourth group took over. The crew received the last signal from the Earth. An apocalypse event happened there, a near extinction level, and life was completely eliminated. So the people aboard the Elysium were the last humans in the entire solar system. The only people awake on the ship at that moment were Gallo and two of his colleagues. After the message was received from Earth, there was total anarchy and chaos aboard the ship, and Gallo massacred the other members of the crew. The only survivor who was left got bored after and began to bring people out of anabiosis, who came to hand and to have fun with them in a peculiar way. He ended up thinking he was a king. All who tried to live according to reason and peace and harmony were destroyed by him. Soon the Mad King grew weary and fell back into anabiosis. At this time, the awakened humans mutated, adapted to the situation, to the chaos, and evil spread through the ship. During this story, Bao and his crew became uncomfortable with the poison that Leland had slipped into their food. They lose consciousness. Peyton is having a hard time too. He suffers a powerful shock when he learns that Earth no longer exists and that there is total mayhem on Elysium. Digesting the information, Peyton feels the symptoms of Pandorum. In doing so, Gallo hypnotizes him with a frantic stare. There is a power surge on the ship, and Bauer and his friends come to their senses. While they were senseless, Leland tied them up and hung them from upside down. The savage man has culinary plans for the company. Bauer tries to talk Leland into letting them go and lays out his plan to restart the reactor. Leland has been awake among the monsters for years and is not inclined to believe in a miraculous rescue. But he notices that lately the voltage is spiking more and more often, and soon the reactor will completely shut down and there will be nothing but darkness and chaos left on the ship. Bauer insists that the reactor must be restarted immediately. The corporal promises that no one will judge Leland for his past gastronomic atrocities of cannibalism because he simply did what one must do to survive in this hell. So these words kind of impress Leland, calm him down, and he releases the prisoners. Bauer immediately convinces his friends that they are a team and contacts Peyton on Leland's radio. According to Bauer's data, Peyton calculates how long the reactor will last. The friends have exactly 47 minutes to do every single thing. Peyton then lines up a route to the reactor. All four friends hit the road. Suddenly, they meet a baby cute mutant. Meng tries to kill him, but Nadia asks to stand down and spare the child. The child immediately starts squealing and calling for the adult monsters and their parents. It turns out that the monsters are actually breathing. This is a really creepy scene. It's normal but still creepy. The friends are immediately pursued by a group of monsters, but they manage to hide. Peyton doesn't give up hope of getting to the captain's bridge, the control center of the ship, but Gallo makes gloating speeches about how Bauer can't reset the reactor because he lost his skills during anabiosis, which means there's no need to steer the ship anymore. Gallo insists on the need to catapult out of the ship in order to live a few more days. Bauer's team gets into the compartment where the families of the crew members were, but all the capsules are empty. Then he remembers that his wife was never on the ship. She was probably unable to have children and they wouldn't take her aboard Elysium. Even before the flight, she dumped Bauer so he could fly without remorse. Thus, she saved his life. Suddenly, Bao notices Peyton's wife, Capsule. He immediately recalls some important information about Peyton himself. The friends continue on the way and come out to the reactor. The insane Gallo insinuates to Peyton that the reactor will not withstand a reboot. but the commander orders him to shut up and wait for Bao to fix everything. Meanwhile, Bauer himself is trying to approach the reactor over the flimsy bridge. The structure cracks, causing one of the monsters to awaken in the depression around the reactor, where they are all in a dormant state and actually kind of breathing cycle. This is where the nest of the mutants is located, the whole hive. There are several hundreds of them there, but they all sleep. They're all asleep, like I told, dormant. The weakened monster growls a little and goes back to sleep, and Bauer continues his way very calmly, quietly. Suddenly, the rusty bridge comes off its mounts and falls down, but Meng grabs it and holds it up. However, Bao falls off and flies down almost all the way to the pit with the mutants. Meanwhile, Nadia runs to the reactor and begins the reboot process, but cannot complete it without Bao's help. He himself carefully goes down to the mutant's nest, takes pieces of the skin and wraps them around him to hide the human smell. The conflict between Peyton and Gallo heats up. The corporal goes out of his mind and wants to eject. He points a tranquilizer gun at Peyton and forces him to begin the process of catapulting the capsule with Gallo inside. But the lieutenant launches only a simulated catapult and closes the corporal in the capsule. He becomes hysterical and shouts curses. And Bauer, in his new guise, cautiously makes his way through the bodies of the sleeping mutants to the stairs leading up from the pit. But Leland, who was illuminating the rooms from above, accidentally drops the flashlight into the hole. The mutants wake up and start growling and looking for the source of the noise. Bauer has no trouble getting to the top, and Meng finally drops a broken bridge into the hole. The surviving mutants notice Meng and rush towards him. The man throws his spear into the crowd and runs away down the corridors. The reactor is seconds away from stopping, but Bauer manages to reboot it. Panic ensues among the mutants left in the nest. Looking at what's going on, Lilian runs towards the captain's bridge. Peter is about to go to the control center, and Gallo in the capsule starts talking in riddles. He calls Peter a corporal and reproaches him for all his sins. Bawa and Nadia wait for the monsters to quiet down and run away from the reactor, and Meng faces the hair mutant in the corridor and gets into a fight with him. The monster is really strong, but Meng kills him with his own spike. After that, the guy notices the baby Newton. The creature makes an innocent face at first, but suddenly slashes Meng's throat with a fast jab. Jesus Christ. Protect yourself at all times. The rule is universal. Gallo gets out of the capsule and approaches Peyton with a gun loaded with a tranquilizer. It's like the lieutenant has double vision. A fight breaks out between the men. The corporal immobilizes Peyton and suddenly their bodies begin to fuse. After a dose of the tranquilizer, Gallo disappears altogether and Peyton feels relieved. Then Leland comes running to the captain's bridge. He begins to recount his experiences, but Peyton quickly eliminates him. Nadia and Bao also make it to the control room. At the same time, Bao already realizes that Peyton is not who he says he is. The false lieutenant sits in the captain's chair and admits to himself that he is in fact Corporal Gallo. It was like an alter ego and just the mind mind visions. He was the one who received the last signal from Earth, and he was the one who killed his crew and didn't go into anabiosis. It was he, Gallo, who set in motion the process that caused the passengers of Elysium to mutate and cause extreme destruction and chaos on the ship. And after having played around for a couple of decades, he fell back into anabiosis, but this time in someone else's capsule, which used to belong to Lieutenant Peyton. Gallo opens the illuminator, but not stars visible behind it. While Nadia tries to figure out their location by looking up, Gallo tries to awaken Bauer's symptoms of Pandorum. He talks about how wonderful it is to give in to one's fears and forget about morality. Gallo believes that laws and morality have ceased to exist with the Earth, but Bauer is of a different opinion. Suddenly, Nadia notices sea creatures passing overboard. This means the ship has long since arrived on Tanis and just lied at the bottom of the sea. Then the logbook shows that the voyage has already lasted 923 years instead of 123 years. People could have awakened 800 years ago and lived peacefully on Tanis without mutants. Upon learning this, Bawa has a Pandorum attack and fires a shot into the electric panel, supposedly to dispose of a mutant. This damages the hull of the ship, the glass cracks, and the water starts to seep in. Bawa quickly grabs Nadia and leads her into the pod. Once inside, he triggers the launch of the pod. A mutant attempts to break the pod but is hindered by the approaching water. The capsule rushes upwards, but the water makes it increasingly difficult to breathe. Bawa puts an oxygen mask on Nadia and holds his breath. Soon, the capsule reaches the surface. The door flying off to the side. The friends come to their senses and see the dry land up close and a huge structure beside. Just then, more than 1,000 more intact capsules with survivors emerged from the water. They all ejected automatically due to damage to the ship's hull. Only Gallo and the mutants remained aboard the sunken Elysium. Thus began the first day of life on Tanis, but we don't know how this ends.